Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today, Sync or Sync. We're very pleased to be launching our research report with you. I'm absolutely delighted that you've been able to join us, and hopefully we'll have a good 1 hour together to share with you the insights from our research. First, let me just run through a couple of administration points about the webinar. We'd encourage you to keep your mics and phones muted during the webinar. To save bandwidth as well, we'd encourage you not to use your cameras unless speaking, and feel free to engage with us through the chat function. So we will be taking questions as we go, so please fire your questions into us using the chat function. In case you wonder where to find that, it is on your speech bubble on the toolbar at the bottom there. We can also take your questions by email if you don't wish to share those on the chat forum, and we will do our best to respond to those questions after the webinar. And we are also recording today's session, so you'd be more than welcome to have a copy and review anything that you've missed. My name is Clive Geldard. I'm a Vice President at EFESO, and I'm your host for the webinar on synchronisation this afternoon. Let me give you a brief introduction to EFESO for those of you that are not familiar with our company. We are a strategy and operations consulting firm that's been growing and evolving now for over 40 years, and we enjoy a strong track record and many long-term relationships with clients across a number of key economic sectors. You can see some of those on the screen. We are a results-orientated consultancy that's also focused on building sustainable capabilities for the longer term, and our current international footprint it covers most geographies, and we have a bench strength of around about 500 or more consultants. So that's a little bit about EFESO. Now, on our webinar today, I'm very pleased to be here with you alongside Mike Policastro and Alessandro De Luca, our distinguished experts that are able to add their personal insights and perspectives to the research findings. I'm really delighted that Alessandro has been able to join us and upgrade the strength of our panel today. With Alessandro, as many of you may know, is now CIO at Merck Healthcare, and formerly SNO lead with Procter & Gamble, and having had the benefit of leading many sync initiatives in both those organizations. And Mike Policastro, well, I've had the pleasure of working with Mike for over 6 years now, and I have to say that Mike is a true sync master. He really understands the ups and downs of a sync journey. So I'd like to say a big hello to Mike and Alessandro, and thank you for not only your contribution today, but also your contributions to this very important research. Now then, if we look at our agenda and batting order today, I'm going to begin with a brief overview of the survey. Then we can move into calling out really the accelerators for synchronization. So during our research, we've been able to look at the data, look at the practices of leading companies, and really start to focus in on what can be the accelerators for the sync journey. And Mike is going to pick a number of those and share his perspectives. Then Alessandro is going to pick up on the story. Alessandro will not only share his view on the accelerators, but he'll share some of his personal insights on how to overcome some of the barriers to synchronization that organizations face. And then we'll move into some Q&A before wrapping up. I'll also announce the winner of our complimentary VIP place to the Gartner Supply Chain Expo, which has now been rescheduled in Barcelona for October. So stay tuned for that one. So on we go. I mean, synchronization, there's a huge ambition amongst supply chain leaders to improve levels of end-to-end synchronization. We know the principles have been around for many years, but companies are really struggling to leverage synchronization. Even advanced companies are finding synchronization challenging. So through our survey work, we really wanted to learn more about the science and the art of synchronization. So this survey aims to provide insights on the overall levels of maturity, the barriers to progress that organizations are facing, as well as highlighting potential solutions that you can use practically in your own businesses to accelerate a sync breakthrough. I really want to say thank you to the survey participants, because they really provided the rich fact base and data as a foundation for our research and report. It really was a practitioner-led survey across a wide range of industry sectors. We had participants from a diverse set of senior roles covering the whole end-to-end value chain. So thanks again, a really great response rate, and that really gave us a lot of encouragement that this was a topic that supply chain leaders really wanted to understand better. And having that solid database has also allowed us to slice the data by industry sector and also across a range of different sizes of companies. So let me start with what synchronization is, because we know that the term is bandied around. It means different things to different people. But through the research, we've been able to highlight that 2/3 of our survey population converged really on these top 3 statements. And these statements really give the essence of synchronization, the focus on delivering customer value by integration and by synchronization of all actors in the end-to-end value chain, and concurrently and in near real time. Also ensuring that the execution of activities happen when they should. So these definitions you see on screen here really are the nuggets and core of our synchronization purpose. So where are companies on the sync journey? Well, here's the stats that came out of our fact base. Just 10% of organizations really consider themselves to be quite advanced in the sync journey today. That's a relatively small proportion, as you can appreciate. 42% claim to be making some progress. But what really surprised us is that 15% are not yet out of the pits. They're not really started on this journey, and 33% very at early days. So that's almost half of our population at early days or not started in this journey. And if we look at that data through the lens of our key industries, where are different industries on the sync progression? And I think going into this research, we maybe had the view that some sectors would be ahead of others, some industry sectors would be ahead of others. When we look at the data, that doesn't seem to be the case. So it's not one industry that's particularly leading, it's individual companies that are taking the initiative to seize the opportunities of synchronization. It's also our observation that there are no structural barriers from an industry perspective. And the other takeaway for us is that the learning and best practices for synchronization are in many ways portable across industry. And so we've taken some insights from the leaders in the sync journey as really learnings that can be transferable to organizations that are perhaps not so mature. Now, what's the prize at stake? I mean, there's evidence that organizations with strongly synchronized end-to-end supply chains are outperforming those that don't, having positive impacts on top line, bottom line, working capital, and customer experience. And you've got some examples of metrics on screen here, taken particularly from the CPG industry. Our survey highlighted that almost all companies that are reporting progress in their sync journey have put in place essential measurement systems, at least for the key metrics. And whilst the majority of the survey population really believe that the benefits of a sync value chain are very tangible and measurable, especially around service, agility, and speed, a lot of companies are struggling to translate those benefits in terms of revenue, cost, and cash. So, what about the top solutions for synchronization? Well, as we explored the drivers and solutions, we found a number of key success dimensions. And on this slide, you can see some of the top 5 that were highlighted. And the solutions here really demonstrate the essence of and the work to be done here to achieve synchronization across people, leadership and change management elements, processes and capabilities, and of course on the digital and technology factors that allow that real-time information flow and end-to-end visibility. The survey data also highlights different practices between leaders and laggards in the race to sync, and it's that learning and experience in the different sync practices that have helped us to identify what we call these 10 accelerators for sync progress. So let me touch on those now before I hand over to Mike. So first of all, we've got here a list of the first 5 accelerators to synchronization, and Mike is going to choose a number of these to talk through in a little more granularity. So here we have 3 that Mike is going to call out in particular: the why and tangible value for synchronization, the importance of securing business leadership sponsorship, and also the need to address cultural and change management elements. And then the 4th area that Mike's going to pick on, this is our second list of breakthrough accelerators. The 4th one Mike's going to pick is to talk more about having robust foundational capabilities. So hopefully that gives you a quick overview of the survey highlights. I hope you'll enjoy reading the research report to dig into those in a bit more detail. Let me at this point welcome Mike to the webinar and hand over to Mike to go through those accelerators we've highlighted there in a bit more detail. Welcome, Mike, and over to you.
Thank you, Clive. I'm delighted to be with the group today. This is an area I've got a lot of passion and a lot of gray hairs on, so delighted to share those with you. And as Clive says, I'm going to briefly touch on 4 of these 10 sync accelerators, which are covered in the sync research paper. So the first is defining the why and tangible value of synchronization. Transforming to a synchronized value chain is accelerated via customer and/or consumer centricity, as depicted here on the left. At the end of the day, value chains exist and remain competitive only if they're delivering services or products that are competitive in the eyes of their customers and/or consumers. This is what delivers the sales revenue, profits, and cash flow for the enterprise to thrive over time. Having a clear line of sight between these business deliverables and synchronization is critical to mobilizing the enterprise and its customers and suppliers on the synchronization journey. While this is such an obvious starting point, it's surprising to me, but it's often not clearly articulated or it's not deeply disseminated along the entire end-to-end value chain. Being very clear on how your customers define value and why they choose you over your competition is critical in the design and operation of your value chain. How do your customers assess your performance? What metrics determine your business success? And how are they enabled via Sync? That's really the intent of this particular insight and accelerator. And by engaging your entire enterprise in this shelf-back design, connecting employees and partners with how they personally support, enable, and measure this value creation is critical to deciding what gaps you need to close and what new capabilities you need to build. Finally, this isn't a static once-off exercise. Frankly, with the pace of change ever increasing and the life cycle of products and services shortening, this ability to stay customer and consumer-centric is actually a very dynamic process, and it needs to be seen as a continuous process. Next slide, Clive. Of course, business leadership is key to driving this consumer and customer-centric value mindset. Enterprises, in my experience, that progress fastest on their synchronization journey are those that have strong business sponsorship, with active leadership encouraging the accelerators and helping address the biggest barriers. So investing in leadership training and awareness on how value chain sync is integral to the enterprise's business model and how sync will deliver bottom line results is really critical. I've been personally involved in progressing sync in multiple business categories across multiple regions, oftentimes with very different organization cultures. As I said, in my experience, the differences in speed and results impact from unit to unit weren't so dependent on the market and industry constraints, but were far more driven by key leaders' attitudes and leadership. And frankly, this is borne out by the survey results you see on the screen. Business leadership needs to be very intentional in their desire to transform from sync laggards to leaders, or to maintain sync leadership despite the constant market and technology dynamics. So leadership training, leadership engagement, and helping leadership to articulate this as a competitive advantage is an important early step. And that's oftentimes one of the key questions we get, which is, where do I even start? And so this is a critical area. Next slide, Clive. And one of the reasons that strong business leadership is key is synchronization requires a more integrated, multifunctional approach to work. And this often requires changes to the existing function-led silos. Here in FSO, we use the PhD acronym to reference the need for integrated approach when building capabilities and enabling change. The P stands for processes. The H for human dynamics, or peoples and skills, and the D for digital and technology. The survey highlighted how important this integrated approach was, and especially, as you see in the chart, the need to focus on people, the organization design, and the culture. Now, we all know that culture and design as an organization sets out the way in which the activities are arranged and coordinated so its mission can be fulfilled and goals achieved. But often, the culture and design may not be visible or may not be the result of conscious choices, coherent with the latest business needs. In fact, many times the organization culture and design may be preventing synchronized value creation. For example, one barrier might be the organization's resistance to a fundamental switch in mindset from a push mindset to a pull mindset, which is needed for synchronization. And while it's fine for functions and supply chain nodes to still pursue internal KPIs in the sync journey, those really need to be reset with a clear pull understanding. How do those functional KPIs enable the delivery of value to the end user? How do they support flow, agility, real-time demand, and connectivity? So adoption of new sync behaviors can be helped by establishing and disseminating, as Clive mentioned before, true end-to-end metrics that encourage cross-functional end-to-end behavior. Some examples of these would be services measured by customers, or total inventory end-to-end, or end-to-end product innovation speed, or end-to-end supply chain driven sales. This just to name a few, but you get the feel. These are holistic end-to-end metrics that require the multifunctional collaboration, which is key for synchronization. And it's not just KPIs. Other examples of enabling sync culture would be, for instance, more emphasis on job rotation across disciplines, giving people more end-to-end experience and kind of enabling end-to-end thinking, or more reliance on multifunctional team structures, so that upstream and downstream implications are built into decision-making, or improved end-to-end digital tools, or having a reward system that's well balanced between these new end-to-end metrics, but also against the traditional functional results. So in sum, for me, this whole culture to enable synchronization is best summarized by the phrase business-led and function-enabled. And that's, I think, a key question as you think about your own organization. To what degree is that balance in place today? To what degree does that culture need to be shifted? Next slide. Thanks. So as the last accelerator example, let me touch on foundational capabilities. This is probably one of the most important enablers for progression in terms of understanding how reliable and in control your foundation processes are across the breadth of the entire value chain, which is represented by the bottom kind of x-axis in this graph. And note that that includes the interfaces both with customers and suppliers. So it's the beyond just the enterprise, it's really the entire value chain. Said another way, leadership clarity on the strategic value of sync and having an organization culture and design supporting sync aren't enough. The benefits of sync must be earned, and they're earned not only via the functional excellence, but also strong cross-functional excellence. This cross-functional excellence I refer to includes things like end-to-end processes such as S&OP, new product initiative management, and integrated platform management, just to name a few. But those very strong cross-functional processes are part of getting this foundation in place. And this strengthening of foundation should be progressed concurrently across all end-to-end disciplines. This end-to-end emphasis on foundation requires multifunctional, enterprise-wide training on continuous improvement techniques. Continuous improvement is a team sport. For me, an example I like to refer to, I was once given the honor of managing the artwork process. What a gift. But it was kind of given to me because it was multifunctional, it was a mess, and frankly, we didn't have a continuous improvement culture to bring it under control, to restore it and bring it under control. But as for those of you working in consumer goods, you know that artwork is typically a weak link in the product initiative excellence process, and yet it probably depends on over half a dozen functions to perform their tasks right, first time, on time, every time. And so establishing standard processes like these that leverage digital tools with well-defined roles and capabilities across functions is really the type of work I'm describing when I say you really need those solid foundations in place if you're going to speed up and make your supply chain and value chain more agile and demand-driven. For me, just as equipment ownership is a prerequisite to manufacturing TPM and TPM progression, I firmly believe that work process ownership up and down the value chain and thinking of everyone having continuous improvement as part of their title or role description is a prerequisite for sustainable foundation capabilities. And you could just, again, just reflect, to what degree does your company or enterprise currently have that continuous improvement mindset outside of some of the more traditional supply chain functions, because it's really needed along the value chain, and growing that and exporting that is a key part of your journey. So these are just a few of the sync accelerators, which are covered in much more detail in the research paper, but there are a few that I've highlighted because they were critical in the journeys that I've been a part of. So I'm going to hand over now to Alessandro, who's going to cover some of the common barriers to sync. And then just as a quick reminder, as mentioned by Clive, following Alessandro's section, we're going to pause for Q&As. And because try to do that via audio, just audio, can get pretty messy. So as Clive mentioned, please use the chat function on your Teams toolbar. It's a little call out box there. But if questions are coming to mind you'd like to make sure we cover in the Q&A section, please send those in, because I'm going to be starting to pull those down as Alessandro covers the next section. Alessandro?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thank you very much for your part. I mean, I think everybody who has been listening and working with you, I had the pleasure to work with you in the past. Very relevant what Mike said. And what I'm going to present now is, out of the survey, there are fundamentally 3 barriers that definitely everybody highlight as possible block roads to move forward. And it's very interesting because you will see three barriers. The challenge is to turn indeed these roadblocks into opportunities. Let's tackle the first one in the next slide, and you will see that the first one, it's really about what we also said before. It's an accelerator. Mike mentioned rightfully leadership as an accelerator. Now, in this chart, you can see 2 bars. The bar that is in dark violet is the bar of, if you want, the laggards of the company that are a little bit following in the journey of synchronization, where the bar that is in light green, let's call it like that, is the leader. And you will see a big difference in terms of C-level sponsorship becoming part of the problem or part of the solution. If you see the laggards, they see, wow, I don't have enough support by my CEO, whoever it is. Whereas for the leaders, having that support is critical to accelerate. And this is what is our role. I worked 20 years in P&G, 10 years in Merck, 2 different worlds. One is fast-moving consumer good, the other is pharmaceutical. But let me tell you that what Mike said, and what I will repeat, having the sponsorship of the leadership is key. Is key in any sector, any industry you will be working, and that is about your role. I mean, your role as a leader is to engage them and also educate them. And if you see also there, the gap between the leadership and skill, between what the laggards are saying and leaders are saying, probably the leading company are educating the C-level in order to be engaged in the synchronization journey. And the other element that again is highlighted from the survey is this fact of discouraging metrics. And that also is a very, very interesting point. In P&G, as well as in Merck, we identify common metrics within sales and supply chain end-to-end. For instance, we call it supply-driven net outside sale, in order to have, again, metrics that help encourage the collaboration and the synchronization rather than being discouraging. So what, in a nutshell, what the barriers are in terms of leadership organization are really the challenge that we have to overcome in order to make this a success. And the same applies to the next one. The next one is very near to my heart, because the next one is talking about data and IT integration. Now, I'm the current CIO, Chief Information Officer of Merck Healthcare. So you can imagine every day, I mean, data, digital in my bread and butter. And when I was reading through the outcome of the survey, what are the fundamental barrier, I would say, wow, I mean, 3 out of them are wrong. And what do I mean are wrong? Are wrong because it's a misconception in the mindset. One is absolutely true. And let me start for the fundamental one and then elaborate from the other ones. What is fundamental is that we cannot have a synchronization without having a right information flow. And the right information flow requires the right master data accuracy. So if there is something that you will have to focus in your company, that the more and more you will drive it in the synchronization world, the more and more your data has to be exact. Because again, there is no optimization of the product flow without a proper information flow. And based on my experience, this has always been the biggest gap in every single company. And it's being solved thanks to the latest focus on technology, because, you know, leveraging technology is absolutely useless if you don't have the right data. So that forces us to improve the data accuracy. But that is the primary area where I suggest you to focus. Then the rest about legacy systems, about, my ERP landscape, about integration idea, integration connectivity, blah, blah, blah. This is part of the mindset approach. Technology today is not anymore a barrier, let me tell you. If you see it again before, as slides from Mike was revealing, I mean, if you want to have the synchronization happen, the impact of technology is just 10%. The rest is mindset, people, skill set, and change management. And this is exactly what it comes out of the survey. And it comes out also when I talk with a lot of colleagues of mine. They always say, hey, how can I optimize my information flow if my ERP, let's put an example, have all different instances? Well, today technology is such that you just have to put a cognitive layer on top, and you don't need anymore this standardization of system or upgrade of legacy system in order to collect data in the proper way. So the message is digital is the opportunity. Mindset of understanding IT and legacy is something that you should overcome. And the last slide that I'm going to show you before opening the floor for question and answer is about the end-to-end value creation. And again, I think the word says it all. That means that we have to talk about the real end-to-end from the beginning of the chain till the customer. And you start from the customer because at the end you want to create value. And here is, again, when you see this result of the survey and you see the difference from leaders and laggards, take the last row. Not one source of truth. When I can tell you that the top-notch company where I work, P&G is, I name one, Merck is another one, they all implemented IBP, integrated business planning, and they all implemented the concept of one source of truth. That is, for me, is a milestone in terms of really making sure that we all talk in terms of process, data, and information about the same sales data, supply chain, volume, and financial data. The single source of truth, the one number empowered by the IBP process is absolutely a must. And is what really make a step change in the chain. Then if you go up again in this comparison, there is something that indeed is a barrier, I've seen it, is the lack of end-to-end cost. So very often, like we said before, the company is built in silos, and then the way of accounting is also done in silos. So you know the manufacturing cost, you know the distribution cost, you know the supplier cost, you don't know the end-to-end cost. Well, when you do it, you will be surprised to see there are a lot of opportunities in the hidden area of the end-to-end chain, that is material supply management cost, that is distribution cost, whereas normally manufacturing has been optimized throughout the last years of process optimization. And then, I mean, something that was mentioned before is really the lack of engagement between teams. I mean, one scene that we know we need all to overcome is the silo mindset. Synchronization doesn't work without breaking the barrier of silos, because again, everybody has to contribute. Synchronization, like rightfully was said before, is having a very synchronized and smooth product flow combined with an imperfect information flow. And that only works if also in terms of organization reward, organization design, and organizational structure, we break the silos. So these are the three barriers that, again, the opportunity is to challenge them and to become accelerator. And having said that, I close my part and we open for the Q&A.
Super. So if you can hear me, please, as mentioned before, enter any questions you want to make sure we cover via the meeting chat bubble. We have gotten a few via email. I'll just cover off some of those as your questions are coming in via chat. Why don't we start? I think this is one I'll direct to you, Alessandro. You mentioned IT and digital as a barrier that can be transformed into an opportunity. However, when talking with my IT colleagues about real-time information, I'm always answered that till we don't do data integration by ERP standardization, this will never happen. What's your experience with this issue?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mike, for the question. By the way, this is a question that always been asked, and by the way, it's a very valid question. Whenever before joining IT, honestly, and I was running supply chain in Merck and before in P&G, I always got this sort of negative answer from the IT department that is, well, it's impossible and so on and so forth. Now, it's not because then I moved to IT that the negative move into positive, is because in the meantime, the technology evolved as such that indeed what was a must, a real must, I mean, 10 years ago was an absolute must to standardize all the ERP in order to have the same level of integration. Now is not anymore the case. Now technology is such that we can definitely integrate any type of ERP or recourse system that you have in the company. And anytime, I mean, whatever is the supplier, is Oracle, SAP, whatever is the version, we can integrate those data leveraging any type of cognitive layer on top that again help in this harmonization. So again, this, I would call it, this was a myth of the past that thanks to today's technology background has been overcome. However, the mindset in some organization may still be there. And this is why it's our role to challenge it. Thanks, Mike.
Super, thanks. Why don't we go with the next one? Have you ever noticed any difference in answers between geographical regions? I'll take a cut at that since I've been involved in the synchronization journey in different regions, but then I'd love your perspective as well, Alessandro, as well as yours, Clive. The answer is 90% of the challenges and solutions I have found are actually common in terms of moving to a synchronization culture and implementing and getting the benefits. However, I would say there are definitely differences, between regions. So, when dealing with regions that are importing and exporting product in consumer goods between markets, there's definitely the consideration of C-vans. I recall as we were doing this work out of Bangkok and Thailand, a lot of our work had to do with moving product through customs and import-export. And in fact, one of the biggest breakthroughs we had in synchronization from Bangkok into Japan was addressing the 12-day customs process importing into Japan. And so that became one of the key constraints in the project. Whereas, for instance, in a North American implementation of synchronization, the opportunities there were enabling the continuous response network and the DC footprint to manage cross-docking in a cross-category fashion, so that we're optimizing full vehicles going to individual customer DCs, and then finally there's an experience running a plant out of Newcastle. We were planning on a daily basis and producing ever decreasing unit amounts, and yet product would be sitting for 5 days on the dock waiting to fill up a vehicle to get a half load off to Germany. And so I think the experiences in executing it will have slight region by regional differences, and obviously the technology and finished product flow will also have a difference. But the principles I found were quite common across all regions. Clive, any builds?
Thank you, Mike. I guess my perspective on this one is it's difficult to generalize. So from a geographic perspective, but I would say that if we look at synchronization, one of the key capabilities is that of collaboration, whether that's internal cross-functional collaboration or the more difficult even the external collaboration across the whole end-to-end value stream, the ecosystem, if you like. And I guess, although I haven't correlated the data geographically, I think we've sensed in a lot of client situations that collaborative mindsets, collaborative culture does vary geography to geography, as it does organization to organization. And I think we do see very clearly some examples, for example, some particular trading markets where retailer or distributor behaviors are actually very traditional, very transactional, and as a consequence, not that collaborative and not that joined up in terms of end-to-end thinking. And I can point, I'm not going to name them on the webinar now, but I can point to certain geographies where trying to achieve better synchronization, trying to reduce some of the losses that are occurring between not only the functional silos, but between the organizational silos, between supplier and manufacturer, or between manufacturer and retailer. You can definitely point to some let's say underlying cultural geographic trends there, and that for sure is an inhibitor to synchronization. And just to turn that onto a positive though, I would say that we see a lot of multinational organizations working really hard on collaborative behaviors. Alessandro talked about this talent profile that gets developed by moving between different functional roles, and I think Mike, you mentioned that as well. So the ability to develop T-shaped profile people that can not only show functional mastery in their own domains, but they have that ability to think end to end, and therefore look at how the whole customer value and customer experience can be improved by doing things better and more collaboratively and synchronized across the chain.
Super, thank you very much, Clive. I'll throw another question over to Alessandro. You mentioned the implementation of cognitive layers multiple times. You also mentioned that data ownership and integrity was one of the biggest barriers to synchronization. From your experience, do companies need to resolve data ownership issues before implementation of cognitive systems, or does the implementation of these resolve the issue?
This is an excellent question. This is definitely an excellent question. Let me tell you the following. Depends which type of data we are talking about. So definitely at, I would say, industry level, I would say even at social level, we have to solve the dilemma of data privacy. That became evident in the COVID-19 timing, where some countries, they fundamentally went over any principle of data privacy, and they track every single individual, being able then to reduce the impact or partially mitigate the impact, and some other just refuse to do it. There is not a right or wrong answer, but there's definitely the need to clarify how we can make sure that we respect the data privacy of the individual while ensuring the data are used for a greater good. Then there is another element that was mentioned in the question, is that, okay, let's assume that to resolve this, that is very important, who owns the data? And there again, it's a very interesting discussion because there are two schools of thought. There is school of thought of the past. I remember when I was working 20 years ago and 15 years ago with some customer that I would definitely not mention. I mean, obviously they were trading data for price terms, and of course, I mean, you want more data, well, then we'll get a better price or a better buying, selling power, and so on and so forth. So obviously, data ownership in the past and still today became a way of even trading in terms of sales price and so on and so forth. Now, more and more, I'm looking at people sharing open data. And by the way, I was listening a couple of days ago to a webinar with a couple of CEO from Silicon Valley, and they were saying, well, you know what, we believe that the era of ownership is finished because now everything is shared. We share platform, we share know-how, we share data, again, with those limitations and understanding that we said before. So we're moving into this direction of sharing data in a protected way, anonymized way, and so on and so forth. But it's not yet the case in all the sector, all the industry, fully understood. So we go back to the last point of the question. Can you still optimize your supply chain having partial access of the data? Yeah, of course. I mean, you can synchronize a part of the chain that allow you to gather data. And by the way, all the IBP that we put in place, again, in PNG and so on and so forth, was about synchronizing, leveraging internal data. There was data from all our production units, data from our country demand system. And already that got synchronized a major part of the chain. And that's definitely, I encourage you to do it because, one, will help you to understand the mindset change. Two, will help you to understand the challenge of technology integration. And three, will help you to share those learning with your partners that you may have downstream in the chain, customer, distributor, and upstream on the chain when the data privacy and data ownership issues are being tackled and solved.
Super. Thank you, Alessandro. Clive, question I'd like to direct to you. It has to do with part of the research paper and responses received in the research. So the question is, what reasons do companies give for not having cross-functional collaboration, end-to-end evaluation? Is it the culture? Is it lack of awareness? Is it the wrong people? Is it the wrong KPIs or job descriptions? Is it the cost to make changes? Do you want to comment on what the survey responses indicate in that area?
Yeah, there's a long list there, isn't there, Mike? I think it's a combination of factors, but the survey data, I think, points to a number of things, particularly around clarity. Clarity of what synchronization is and actually how you measure it and how you translate that into business value. I think there is evidence that we sometimes, from a supply chain perspective, are not talking the language of the business. And therefore, to get that senior level engagement and sponsorship for a sync initiative, we're not able to articulate to colleagues in other sales, commercial functions, or indeed financial functions and so on, exactly the value that a better sync supply chain can bring to the business. I think there's a ray of hope there, though, as we see some of the leading companies bringing in stronger revenue management capabilities. And I think this is one of the most exciting developments in synchronized, joined up business thinking that I've seen for a long time. So if we look at, Alessandro mentioned this challenge of lack of understanding, lack of visibility of end-to-end cost to serve, which is a frustration I think supply chain leaders have lived with for a number of years. But with the emergence of revenue management as a capability in many businesses now. Supply chain almost has an ally at the table, and revenue management reporting through very often a commercial or finance or marketing structure actually is the perfect coalition, if you like, to partner with supply chain in order to drive better integrated decision making through S&OP, through IBP, but also in terms of optimization of portfolio management, customer profitability initiatives, etc. So I hope that answered the question. Any builds on that from your perspectives, Mike, Alessandro?
No, that was perfect. Why don't I think we have time for one final question, then I'll hand back to you, Clive. So if you want to take a quick shot at this, Alessandro, I'd love to take advantage of having your digital mastery on today's webinar. So another question on supply chain IT infrastructure. Can you share your rule of thumb to assess the cost-benefit equation between the adoption of a fragmented best-of-breed solution versus simpler backbone structure boosted with hyper-automation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question. So let me answer in two ways. So number one, I spent significant time before COVID exactly to understand the ROI of all the digital solution, and had a big challenge discussion with finance, with the CEO to justify digital. Interesting enough, after COVID, nobody cares anymore because everybody is leveraging digital, and digital is the only way, at least to engage customer, at least to transmit information and to manage things. And by the way, it's a fantastic way also to track everything in real time and so on and so forth. So interesting enough, now is very much less pressure about it, about the financial return of investment, and more in can I accelerate the implementation of digital. That brings to a famous story that I always say is that, I mean, if you take the Chinese word for crisis, the Chinese word is made by two ideograms. The first one is danger, and the second one is opportunity. What do I mean is that COVID-19 and the new normal that is going to bring will bring all this set of opportunity for accelerating digitalization. So that's why, I mean, let's take the opportunity of this crisis to have a fantastic business case for accelerating digitalization. Then in the question, there was also in certain ways that, if I understood well, is that it's better to have sort of best of breed and application, but probably scale on a lesser scale, or it's better to have a more simplified infrastructure, but at a scale on a global basis. I think that was the sense. Nevertheless, let me answer in this way. I believe in scale. If you want to have the digital to drive value, you have to have a solution that you are able to scale it across your organization, ideally globally. Because I've seen hundreds of digital brilliant solutions that improve a specific functionality, but can work only in one manufacturing plant or only one specific supply chain or only one country. Those are beautiful, fantastic, but useless in terms of productivity. So solutions should be scalable. And then when people ask me, okay, how do you measure the success of a solution? It's very simple. There is one KPI, apart obviously the business result. This KPI is called adoption. What do I mean? I mean is that if you provide a solution to the business, or if you implement a solution to the business, to your supply chain people, to your manufacturing people, and they adopt it, well, then means that the solution is successful. If you still have to force after the proper change management, it means that the solution has some gaps. So again, scale is a fundamental piece to make sure that you drive productivity out of digital. Adoption is the KPI to measure the success of a project.
Perfect. Thank you, Alessandro. Clive?
Great points. Mike, thank you for orchestrating that Q&A. And if there are further questions that we haven't been able to answer on the webinar, we'll do our very best to take those on email and respond after the webinar. But thank you, Mike, and thank you, Alessandro, for bringing to life some of the key insights from the research. Great that you've been able to share those views with us today. So let's try and pull this all together just in terms of key takeaways. And in the few minutes left, just leave you with our key thoughts from the research. Organizations need to be clear on what synchronization means for them and why, in terms of compelling business need, and that's certainly something that a lot of organizations are struggling with, to have that sort of purpose-led view of synchronization. The benefits are clearly tangible. That comes out loud and clear from the data, but they need to be translated into the impacts on revenue, cost, and cash. Senior level accountability is really important to make sure that you've got the end-to-end scope, because that's critical to success. And we know that synchronization is going to need new skills and capabilities, as I mentioned earlier, particularly around collaboration internally and externally. And you need to take a step-by-step progression to synchronization in order to lock in the benefits as you go, and that will help build momentum. And then finally, and I think the evidence is now emerging as we come out of lockdown and crisis, that in this new world reality, actually synchronization will be a differentiator, and it's going to be something that will those leading organizations working on sync will really use to regenerate performance and growth, not only for their own organizations, but those entities, those suppliers and customers in their ecosystem. I recognise we've not been able to do full justice to the research report on today's short webinar. However, we really hope that you enjoy reading the research, and we look forward to receiving any comments and feedback you may have to the research document. And we'll make sure that everybody that's joined the webinar today receives a link so that they can download their personal copy of the research report. And we very much encourage you to disseminate the report with your colleagues and across your organizations. Now then, in the short time remaining, there's one very important piece of business still to call upon. We had intended to showcase this research, in fact, this week at the Gartner Supply Chain Symposium in Barcelona. That's now been rescheduled till October, but we wanted to keep our promise of offering up a lucky winner, one of our survey participants that we drew out of the hat, who will receive a VIP ticket to the Gartner Symposium in October. And we're very much looking forward to seeing you there. And with a drum roll, our winner is Bernard Schaap from BSH organization. So congratulations to Bernard, and we look forward to welcoming you to Barcelona. And that is just about everything. So may I give a big vote of thanks to Mike and Alessandro, the real sync masters and practitioner experts, for sharing their insights and views on synchronization in today's webinar. Don't forget to email us any questions and feedback on the report. We'll get the link out to you just as soon as, so that you can download your own copy. And with that, I thank you for your time and attention, and wish you a great rest of the day. Thank you again, and bye-bye.